Okay. Good evening and welcome to the weekly Lawrence City Commission meeting. As I said last week, one of the things that's important, if we can believe weather prognosticators, this weekend it's going to be extremely cold. Please, check on your neighbors. I mean, it's a good idea. Now, we're talking about temperatures below zero. It only takes a minute. Give them a call, go over and knock on a door. It only takes a second. Make you feel good too, okay? So, first item on the agenda tonight is the consent agenda. All matters listed below on the consent agenda are to be considered under one motion, will be enacted by one motion. There'll be no separate discussion on these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Are there any items on the consent agenda that a member of the commission would like to have removed for separate consideration? Okay. Any items on the consent agenda that a member of the public would like to have removed for separate consideration? Okay. Hearing none, there was. Item number 8 has been deferred. That was the agreement with Lawrence Sports Corporation. And so to the consent agenda, we need to add claims to 178 vendors, and this includes payroll-related payments, in the amount of $5,112,405.63. Is there any questions or comments about the claims? I would entertain a motion to approve the claims subject to the deferral. I'm sorry, there were two other deferrals also. This was item 5G and H. These items pertain to the assessments and the authorization on the downtown parking garage. Tom, I assume those will be back in a week or so?
Yes, once we get that. I think actually maybe in January.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with those items being deferred and the addition of claims, I would entertain a motion for approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and second to approve the consent agenda with those items deferred and the claims to be added. It's made by Commissioner Boley, second by Commissioner Larson. All in favor of that motion, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0. Next item is general public comment. Public is allowed to speak to any items or issues that are not scheduled on the agenda after first being recognized by the mayor. As a general practice, the commission will not discuss or debate these items, nor will the commission make decisions on items presented during this time. Rather, they will refer the items to staff for follow-up if necessary. Individuals are asked to come to the microphone, sign in, and state their name and address. Speakers should address all comments and questions to the City Commission. Ken, how are you?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm well. Hope everyone else is doing well. For the record, my name is Ken Easthouse. I'm at 1611 East 24th Street. I come before the Commission just with a simple request. Myself and other members of the Prairie Park Neighborhood Association have been noticing an increase in traffic along Haskell Avenue between 31st and 23rd Street, particularly this past month since the opening of the South Lawrence bypass. I know it's been kind of in everyone's periphery to take a look at studying the traffic flow in the area. I come here kind of as a representative of the community saying we've noticed a definitive increase in traffic along Haskell Avenue and also along both East 25th Street and East 27th Street through the neighborhoods as people have been going through. So I'm here as a representative to ask that a traffic study be commissioned just to take a look at the traffic flow and see if we need to make any changes to both Haskell Avenue and then possibly put in some traffic control mechanisms on both East 25th and East 27th Street as well.
Okay. Why don't we do this, Ken? Tom, can we ask Public Works to start running some counts on those streets? And we'll start a process, okay?
And that's all I wanted.
Okay,
All right,
thanks.
thank you so much.
Is there any other general public comment on any items that are not on the agenda?
Good evening, members of the council, Mr. Mayor, Tom. I've
Could we have your name, sir?
Oh, yes, it's Mike Chappell. I live at 2701 Meadow Drive, 66047. I usually watch the city council on TV every Tuesday night. This room seems bigger on TV. But I heard some things up here last week that disturbed me quite a lot. One, a few months ago, the city council opened up a bag of worms when you let a group take over the city council meeting. And now it seems like it's going to happen again. First of all, I am pro-immigration as long as it's done legally and the people are vetted properly. Something to do with the dreamers that've been here for 10 to 20 years, something needs to be done with them. But the others that are coming across the borders right now should not be. So therefore, I am speaking that Lawrence should not become a sanctuary city. There was a law passed back in 1979, Title 8, Section 1325 of the immigration law, that's basically states that half the federal funds can be held from the city and from the school systems. So the people that are wanting this, ask them if they're going to make up the tax dollars from the citizens of Lawrence instead of raising taxes on the city of Lawrence if you do lose the public funding. Also, Governor Abbott of Texas is seeking a law in Texas to withhold all state funds from sanctuary cities. The president of Brown University and the president of Princeton University has finally stood up to the students and said their campuses are not going to become sanctuary campuses because they will lose federal funds. So call for securing the borders or build a wall like Mexico did on its southern end. I don't care, but something needs to be done. And I rise also to support the police officers because something was said about the police last night or last Tuesday. The police officers, too many of them have been killed in the line of duty this year in this country. So 6 officers in Georgia just the past few days. A officer in St. Louis was shot at while he was sitting at a traffic light. A Johnson County police officer was killed when his car was rear-ended while he was writing a ticket because the man was here illegally. But not all these are illegals, so don't give me that. So don't get me wrong on there. Also, a fireman was shot in the leg the other night while he was riding his engine as they were responding to a fire. And in Chattanooga, the military was attacked by people. So simply, if we can, call for the enacting of the Kate's Law, which is named after Kate Steinle, who died in her father's arm as they were walking along the pier in San Francisco when she was shot by a man who had just gotten out of jail 30 hours before because the city of San Francisco police could not notify immigration about this man. And 2 women were killed while they were waiting to cross the street in Kentucky the other day. And then, as long as we're doing this, let's go with the VA. Let's call for cleaning up the VA. A soldier, a man who had fought for this country, bandages had not been changed for 21 days. They finally changed the bandage, and in that time, maggots had formed, and he later died from the infection. A man died in a vet hospital in Florida this past week, and his body was just wheeled out in the hall and left there for 9 hours. Vets are living on the streets and are homeless. Some of them have PTSD from their war wounds, and others have got and others are just homeless. And they are not being looked after. And finally, since seniors this year, I don't know if anybody's looked at how much increase you got on your Social Security for next year. The answer is 0. So call for all state, all people in Washington, Topeka, no pay raises this year. And President Obama wants 18% raise in his money for next year for all living presidents. No. If they need a job, Walmart's hiring greeters. Thank you very much for letting me vet. I'm sorry, but I just had this on my mind and I needed to say it. Thank you very much, and why something else I may sound politically incorrect for. Everybody works for the city commission. Merry Christmas.
Other general public comment?
Hi,
Hi.
Wendy Smith. Changed my hair. So I bet you didn't recognize me. Okay, thanks for that share. There's an app I just happened to look at real quick because I usually keep you apprised that said 902 police shootings, and it's jumped to 907 since I opened the app. Just wanted to let you know that. So, I had a few things real quick, promise. Maybe. I'm here to stay late for the work session, but I wanted to share real quick during the public comment. And I tend to get off topic sometimes, so I made notes this time. The Montgomery bus boycott. I'm sure y'all remember that. You've heard about it. It's always talked about in the books, and it's one of Martin Luther King Jr.'s most, noted point in history they talk about. Started December 5th, 1955, protesting the segregation of buses. So let's think about that for just a second, where they sat on the bus. They fought that for a year, and the only reason it was overturned, the bus company didn't succumb to the boycott. No. It was federally changed with a law over a year later in 1956. The backlash of that happening was great. 2 days after the inauguration of desegregated seating, someone fired a shotgun through the front door of Martin Luther King Jr.'s home. A day later, on Christmas Eve, white men attacked a black teenager as she exited the bus. 4 days after that, 2 buses were fired upon by snipers. In one sniper incident, a pregnant woman was shot in both legs. This was January 10th, 1957. Bombs destroyed 5 black churches and the home of Robert S. Grates, one of the few Montgomeryans who had publicly sided with the MIA. That was over sitting on a bus. January 23rd, a group of Klansmen who would later be charged for the bombings lynched a black man, Willie Edwards, on the pretext that he was dating a white woman. So the city, Montgomery, elite, that would be us, moved to strengthen segregation in other areas. That's what they moved to do. They decided to segregate more. And in March 1957, passed an ordinance making it unlawful for white, and this is quoting, unlawful for white and colored persons to play together or in company with each other in any game of cards, dice, dominoes, checkers, pool, billiards, softball, basketball, baseball, football, golf, track, and at swimming pools, beaches, lakes, or ponds, or any other game or games or athletic contests either indoors or outdoors. That's called marginalization on a pretty grand scale. So do you believe that racial injustice has been cured since then? Just a quick question. That's what people love to type on my wall. Quick question. Do you think racial injustice has been cured since then? I don't. So I wanted to address the solidarity statement, because that's been a hot topic this last couple days. The solidarity promise that you signed. Some people said that you were coerced. In the U.S. especially, there are unspoken code of white solidarity, which is to say that you agree with each other on how things should be. Deviating from this norm is uncomfortable for you. It's a red flag, and that flag is called white fragility. I'm trying to educate you because I've asked you to read through and find stuff on your own, and it hasn't happened. Anyway, you've been trained through this invisible, to the white man, thread, sewn through every piece of social fabric in place. That's called white supremacy. You've been taught that you're better, smarter, more worthy, and should be catered to, answered to, spoken to, only when necessary, and calmly at all times. That's called tone policing. To challenge that supremacy is to challenge white solidarity, and it's defended by this strong, the almost bad name of fragility. It's a pretty strong defense mechanism. This is why you were asked if Black and brown lives mattered to you, so that you could represent all of your constituents. The ones you were asked to state is because, why you were asked to state that is because of the dominating, deadly, corrosive, yet outrightly unspoken rule that only white lives matter. You were asked, demanded by your community, by the weakest and most unrepresented, to go outside your comfortable white supremacy and represent all of them. It was for you to state that, yes, Black lives matter, Native American lives matter, LGBTQIA lives matter, the marginalized, the literally pushed to the side, the people you weren't even supposed to play with 50 years ago, asked you to stand in solidarity with them. They said they feel invisible and unworthy in this community. They described it to you while in great pain, just the same as a child might say to an adult, "You are hurting me." And you didn't even look up to reply. So you were asked to look and hear and see them and recognize they matter. That's why you were asked for the solidarity letter, and that's why you wrote and you signed it. Some folks said it was under duress, but I don't agree. I believe that you didn't think it was important to say until you were asked. But I think that it meant something when you sat down and had to think about what to say. When you had to think about representing all the people that you campaigned to represent, you had to think, did I include everyone in this statement? And I bet it was hard for you to be sure that you included everyone. But see, I don't think you realize how easy it is to step out of that solidarity. As you commented publicly, your confliction with the white businessman. So you stood in solidarity with Black Lives Matter, Indigenous Lives, Standing Rock, Sioux Tribe, LGBTQIA, and we asked for intersectional for a reason. See, if there was a white business boycott only, this conversation wouldn't even come up. They'd all just be boycotted, and they'd be pissed off that they were being boycotted because they can't control being white. But you can control being racist or bigoted. If you're a Black business and you're not in solidarity with LGBTQIA, Indigenous, Native folks, Muslim, or any other intersection, then you aren't about liberation. Get it? That Black Lives Matter, LFK, has made it extremely clear in every way that this is an intersectional liberation. They've never ever gotten us to understand that the oppressors don't get to tell the oppressed how to become unoppressed. That makes no sense. We are the oppressors. So when they forced us to go outside white solidarity and you say, I see you, I hear you, you do matter. I campaign to represent you and allocate city resources to every one of you, including policemen with guns and badges, and that you stand with them in every battle. That's what you did. That's what you said. Well, here's some education. Because here's what you wrote, Matthew Herbert, City Commissioner. This is your quote, your words. This article that is now going viral has me deep in thought this rainy afternoon. Small, locally owned business are the lifeblood of our community, and as such, I tend to be hesitant when the notion of a boycott of any sort is brought up. I want to make sure the reasoning behind the boycott is just. Promoting social justice is certainly a worthy cause of a boycott, but I'm growing increasingly nervous with each and every new Java break style story I hear. They are not alone in their complaint of being boycotted without being reached out to. Some of the names that came up in the boycott list have me scratching my head saying, really? Watson's Barbershop? Henry's Coffee Shop? Java break? It is important in any social justice movement that we not lose the forest for the trees. I believe that equality and social justice have to exist if we are to build a functioning society for all. As such, I absolutely believe that Black Lives Matter. Still your words. I believe that promoting social justice and liberty for all is absolutely critical on a national as well as local level. But I also believe that boycotts without proper due diligence as that end up wrongfully labeling local businesses as outcasts within our community do more to divide than they will ever to unite. Those that need to be called out should be, but you'd better make sure you check step 1 before you proceed to step 2. My mouth is super dry. All right, so education time. Boycott, withdrawal from commercial and social relations as a punishment or protest. Seems to me a lot of people like to use the word punishment instead of protest. But there it is. Locally owned business. That means that capitalism is more important than lives. Increasingly nervous, that's white fragility. The reason behind, you said reasoning behind the boycott is just fighting racial injustice. That's the reason for the boycott. People dying as a result of systemic racism. So you said that's okay, but they're not alone in their complaint without being reached out to. So we didn't ask them properly. That's called tone policing. People are uncomfortable with a boycott. Oh my God, are you kidding me? That's odd. Some of the names that make up the boycott list have me scratching my head. See, I already went over that. Due diligence. Watson's would not write a letter that was intersectional. Java break, I didn't even read his letter because he talked instantly about not being asked while he was talking about being asked. And he also said he wasn't asked properly because the marginalized were supposed to, I suppose, walk in there in their marginalized state of marginalization and fear and ask this person, will you be in liberation with me? That's what he wanted, I suppose. Because you own a 24-hour coffee store in the LFK, but you can't figure out that there's people needing solidarity letters. Where's that coming from? And then you ended up with the wrongfully labeling a local business as an outcast within our community. Oh my God, did you really just flip the script like that? And made that poor businessman the marginalized outcast? You wrote your letter in September. I don't know how anyone on any source of any place of this planet cannot know that solidarity letters have been expected. And you know what's really sad about that? Is the reason they're asked. Because the white supremacy is already constantly underlined, underscored, and boldened. So people have to beg to say, I matter. We're killing them emotionally, spiritually, physically. You said you stood in solidarity with Black Lives Matter, but then you were very easily pushed out. You know what? I'm done.
Thank you. Other public comment?
Hello, my name is Vivica Price, 3001 West 30th Court. So Wendy just said a lot, and it's important that you guys really listen to that because you have often said that Lawrence is a safe place. It is the most liberal place, at least I've heard from the city manager several times in one meeting, that it is the most liberal place and safest place in Kansas I think you'll ever find. You claim that, and what we see on a day, at least what I've seen, My father, a black man, a minority, has been told, go back to your country because you're an immigrant. Throw in a few colorful words there, and I think you know what I'm talking about. Friends that I have at school, the people that you probably have seen multiple times, for all you know, they could be standing next to you at this moment, are constantly degraded through misgendering, dead naming, check all of the above, transphobia. Muslim individuals on campus are harassed by fraternity groups and other civilians who may just be out there and threatened with violence. People of color in this town do not feel safe at certain moments. I can't speak for everyone, but I know there are several members who do not feel safe on a daily basis because of things that have happened in this community, like what I just said with my father's incident. So all of these things happen in Lawrence, this safe place that has been claimed many times, and it's time to stop sugarcoating. It's time to stop tone policing this Lawrence and this all whitewashing it. This is what we live in, and it's tailored for the white cishet male. Our people are really dying, and like Wendy said, emotionally, physically, spiritually, it's affecting all of the marginalized communities. And you have got to open your ears and listen and act, because it's important. So.
Thank you. Frank?
My name is Frank Jansen, 33rd New Hampshire. Some of you may know I lived in the Middle East for 6 years, 5 years in Oman, 1 year in Yemen. I just came back 5 years ago, teaching Arabs English language. As we know, there are all kind of disturbances around the Middle East, Arab worlds. There are quite a few Arab students and residents here in Lawrence, Kansas. And I'm not going to come sit on the floor and ask you to say that Arab lives are important. However, they are. We understand that. And in fact, in a little while, we're going to have the chief of police who has Arab background speaking to you. So just want to let you know that we have a lot of Arabs here in town. You should remember that they are important. Thanks.
Thank you. Donnie?
My name is Donald Southern. I've been a citizen of Lawrence for a long time. I think the thing that troubled me the most was what I heard a few days ago about the killings in Istanbul, Turkey. You know, and that touched me. And I thought, you know, in this moment, I should pray. And I did. In that moment, for the well-being and the safety of everybody in this world. You know, I want to pray, want to continue in prayer, bring about a lasting peace. You know, I know the history of America. You know, I've heard it from generations that lived before me. You know, but the troubled time I can't explain. You know, but I'm just thankful that we are all safe at this very moment. You know, we don't know what's going to happen when we leave here, or what we might face. But it's not as bad. It's not bad. As bad as what's going on, you know, other places. You know, so I just pray and continue so that we have peace here. Thank you.
Thanks, Donnie. Okay, any other general public comment? Okay, thank you all. Next item are commission items. Any commission items tonight? Nope. Okay, city manager's report none. Any calendar items tonight? Anything we needed to add? Okay. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn this city commission meeting.
So moved. Second.
Motion made and second to adjourn the city commission meeting made by Commissioner Herbert, second by Commissioner Boley. All in favor of that motion, aye? Aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes 5-0. This meeting is adjourned. Don't anybody get up yet. Okay. We are on to our work session, and our work session, just to give everybody a general description of what we do, is this gives us an opportunity to discuss items that are going to come to the commission in a lot greater detail, be able to give us that opportunity again to be able to talk about a number of things, but specifically tonight we've got one item to deal with. and it's a presentation from the chief, and we're going to get to that in a minute. I do want everybody to know that we are going to allow public comment after the presentation and after general discussion by the City Commission. One of the things that I want folks to understand tonight, again, we will take your public comment. We will gladly take your public comment. We look forward to hearing anyone who wishes to address the Lawrence City Commission on the presentation and on the ordinance, the draft ordinance that's here. I want everybody to understand, and this is important, we have been asked that, as we look at this, that, we're able to make up our minds tonight. This is advertised as a work session. And in a work session, we do not make decisions on items that come before us. I want everybody to understand, as an ordinance comes forward, it's got to go through 2 readings. It's got to be on 2 consecutive weeks or 2 meetings that it'll take 2 votes on anything that's going to happen from this body. And I want to make that clear. Now, I know, there in the last 24 hours, there's been, a situation, another meeting. Folks, this body is here to take comment. We are here to listen to concerns as we have over the past, in any wide range of things. But we're going to do it in a civil manner, okay? We're going to treat each other with the respect that each and every one of us are due. And, we're going to come out like what Lawrence, Kansas does. And that is, we make decisions based on general discussion back and forth. That's what Lawrence, Kansas is about. I've been involved with it a long time. Have I made the right decision every time? I bet any one of you in here, the answer is probably no in anybody's mind. There's been times that I have made bad decisions, and I can ask each one of you, and I'll bet on it. But one of the things that I say is that people that have come to our meetings and people who have talked have always presented important points and ones that have need to be heard over time. The hardest thing that I've ever found in this body is to come to the microphone right there and be able to address the governing body. I did it one night. It was the most petrifying thing I ever did in my life. But I want you all to know that, we respect what you're going through. Our staff, and I want everybody to understand, we are truly supportive of our staff and the work that they do. These folks put in some hard hours. Our police department, these folks do everything that they can for us. And for that, we appreciate the hard work and the dedication that you all provide to each and every one of us. I mean, it can't go without saying. But there's the other side of the deal, too. We have to talk about making sure that we always make it better. And so, folks, that's what we're here to do tonight. Chief, we look forward to hearing your presentation, and we'll go from there. But I want everybody to understand we're here to hear comments tonight, and that no decision will be made. If anybody has additional information after tonight's meeting, I want us to make sure that you send it to us. You can send it via the city manager's office. If you send it to the city manager's office, each and every one of us will get it. If it's something that's specifically for any of the one of us, our addresses are posted online. You're more than welcome. You have them at your fingertips. So please provide us with that information also. So anyway, we're here to hear the chief's report. Tom, staff, anybody else, any additional things before we begin? Okay. Chief, good to see you tonight.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners, thank you. I'm joined by Captain Anthony Brixius from our Community Services Division. He's helped me extensively with this presentation, especially from the technology aspect, because this is the younger, newer generation. I'm starting to feel my age. We're going to divide up this presentation as well a little bit, just so one person's not up here talking the whole time. We have a lot of important things to talk about. As I prepared for this meeting and I listened to some of the speakers at the public comment earlier and have paid attention to things in the past, the American law enforcement's relationship with communities over the last 50, 60, 70 years has not always been a good one. We can all look and see historical things that have happened that have made us cry a little bit in the fact that, sometimes law enforcement has gotten wrapped up into the politics of things. So the example of desegregation or segregation and enforcing rules of who can be on a bus or not is inappropriate use of law enforcement, but that was the states pitted against federal politics, and we've gone through that. But there are still places where people aren't treated correctly with some gross consequences. At the same time, I'm very proud of the nobility and the professionalism of modern law enforcement. We have improved across the nation. We've improved here in Lawrence. There's some incredible heroics and nobility and sacrifice in law enforcement, serving the community and going out there and as a group, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, proving that they every day in their duties do care about black lives, do care about other lives, all those other marginalized people. They're the ones out there every day putting themselves at risk to help people. Sometimes we don't always have the solutions. So what we're trying to do is constantly evolve, constantly get better. And I think what we're going to show you tonight is a plan for taking all this in the backdrop, recognizing that I think we do have a good police department. I'm not saying we can't get better. We have made mistakes. Mr. Mayor, just like you said, you've made mistakes. We've all made mistakes. We're human beings. I don't think that we've are a department like some places that's lost the complete trust of the community. So I think this is a good opportunity to kind of review where we're at, where we've been, some of the improvements we've made. That'll be kind of the first part of the presentation. The second part of the presentation, as it follows the format of the memo, is some information about review boards. There's interest in that and how that can be part of making the department better. And then the last section is going to be recommendations, what we think are really, truly things that we can implement that'll improve the department. So the overall theme, there's two different themes. What's the overall objective? The overall objective, as I think, is to make police officers better, to prevent bad things from happening, to better the culture and the policies and our instruments that we look at to measure what we do and how we grade officers on their performance and those things. So we'll kind of walk you through that, and hopefully you'll have some good questions at the end. So I'm going to turn it over to Captain Brixius for the first part of the presentation.
Thank you, Chief, Mayor, City Commissioners, for having me. Excuse me while I get this presentation up very quickly. So the mayor talked about it a little bit, Chief talked a little bit about it, and this is a journey. It's the continuing evolution of law enforcement in this country and in this city. To start the topic out, I think it's important to understand kind of where we are and some of the key issues, whether it's training or how we represent the community, whether it's diversity or just us in the community. The first thing that we have to understand is we're a pretty lucky community, police department. And I say that because we represent a wonderful community, and I tell you, in the last year or two, I've been thanked more than I have in the last 10 years of my career. And we get to see that on a daily basis. You can see just the letters and letters behind. The community is treating us well, things like the Valor Awards, and recognizing what we do. And we've had some really heartfelt moments with people whose lives that we've significantly affected. When we look at the police department, one of the things that is often talked about is, are we representative in the community? One of the things that we try to do is recruit, hire, and retrain diverse populations, whether it's women in law enforcement, which is not a significant number, just historically, or people of different minority groups. We also we advertise through places like the Women's Leadership Institute, the National Minority Report. We make a pretty consistent effort to try to attract and retain quality individuals. We also sell.
I told you it's tough to stand there.
It is, yeah. You know what, as we have different diversity, we also celebrate our diversity. And when the occasions are right, certain times we promote our diversity within the department to leadership positions. All of this is in order to get a department that, as we talked about before, that is representative of our community, that has different faces throughout the department, so we have a greater understanding of the different things that our community goes through. So a couple key highlights. Since 2011, women in staff position has doubled. Minorities in staff positions has doubled. In 2015, 14% of the department staff were minorities. Before this was, in 2011, this was 8%. Females and African Americans as a population within the department has also increased significantly, and we've made consistent efforts to recruit various groups to include Haskell nations or the various indigenous populations. I talked about training a little bit as we started, and one of the things that has really been, in my opinion, an evolution of law enforcement, and this started probably in the last 6 to 8 years, is how we deal with problems. For so much of the time in American history, law enforcement was just expected to deal with the problem by making it stop. Now we're still a problem solver and we're expected to come to a resolution, we're given new tools to do that. One of the things that we have is crisis intervention training. We're in the process of trying to train all of our officers in crisis intervention. We believe that could be done by 2018. We've got a significant portion of our department in that. And what that does, it helps officers have different ways of dealing with these crisis situations besides just putting handcuffs on somebody or making the problem stop in that manner. Fair and impartial policing. Fair and impartial policing started for us, at least through KLATC and Dr. Lori Friedel. I believe the chief went down there. And what that policing was about is so much of our training, and we've always gone through racial or other bias-based policing, was about race. The fair and impartial policing makes us realize that everybody in this room, everybody who's a human being has certain biases. It may not be against race. It may be against the size of a person. I know that my bias way before this training is I don't like Missouri because I went to the University of Kansas. So that's one of my biases. But what it is we have to recognize our biases and work through those things. We also receive training in communication and de-escalation. So much of the time people are when we deal with them, are in some of the worst days of their life. It's not uncommon for us to deal with people that are just having a horrendous time, and so obviously their emotions are escalated quite a bit. And even if there has or hasn't been a crime committed, we gain so much by trying to de-escalate those situations and not be the escalator of the events and make situations worse than they are. Within our department, we have a lot of different programs. One of the programs is our neighborhood resource officers, who also are kind of co-tasked as public affairs. Within them and the school resource officers, we have a lot of community outreach that is designed by the department. But it goes beyond that too. It goes to the everyday patrol officer or detective who takes their time and participates in this community. Quite a bit of ours is with the youth, but it's also with going out and just reaching out and talking to individuals and seeing how things are going in their life and the places that we can help them, many times outside the realm of law enforcement. We do a lot of things like we have special events. This one would be Trunk or Treat, where downtown we hand out candy and people get to come and play in the police car, and it provides significant community interaction. But this doesn't happen just by design as well. It happens when people and patrol officers are out on their daily duties. So many times we get information or calls about an officer stopping and hanging out with kids at their birthday party, playing basketball. And one of the great things that I feel like that Chief Khatib gives us is the latitude to do this. You can look at things in two ways. If I stop and play a 20-minute basketball game with a group of kids, I'm either participating in community policing and being community-oriented, or I'm dodging my duties. And it's really a matter of perspective. But I think for the city of Lawrence and for the citizens of Lawrence and the police department in Lawrence, it's important that we're able to have these interactions so we can gain the trust of the public. Blue Santa is a program that we have done for several years now, and what that program does is it gains money for Christmas presents and actually family meals for those who may not be able to afford presents for their children or kids. Also, we take a turkey out to them, and it's a wonderful event, and I know that officers genuinely get excited about putting on a blue Santa Claus hat and participating with the kids. So many of our people in our community and within our police department are coaches, and this is beyond their realm outside of the law enforcement. They do football, baseball, basketball, and they have contact with the young lives in this community nearly on a daily basis. And you can always tell the coaches, because anywhere they go, somebody of different age, depending on when they coach, comes up to them and says, "Hey, Coach so-and-so," never officer or never sergeant or anything like that. "Hey, Coach Grady, how are you doing today?" And it's a wonderful thing to have in this community. Boys and Girls Club is something that we participate in quite a bit, and I would say it's gone even beyond that we do a program called Bigs in Schools, in which a police officer is paired with a little, and they go have lunch with them on a weekly basis. We've also put ourselves out there. So one of the things that you have to do, and I wouldn't say you have to, but it's certainly enjoyable, is to show people that you're human too. And so often you're portrayed by what's on a TV screen or what somebody's interaction on potentially their worst day was with you. All of that is great, and I just wanted to give you a picture, and trust me when I say this is a small snapshot of the things that your officers are doing in the community. It's a very small snapshot. The next part of the equation, though, is we have to increase our own accountability. Raids Online is a program, I believe, that went live this year, and what it is a crime mapping system. So if I'm a citizen, I can go see what's going on in my neighborhood. I can tell if there's a burglary, or if there's been a sexual assault, or if there's something that I should be concerned about that's going on in my neighborhood. It also allows media to access that as well. We have been very upfront with our internal accountability. I've looked on other departments' websites to see what they're putting out there, and it doesn't seem to be very much. We do avoided citation report, we do TASER report, and OPA, which is our Office of Professional Accountability, and our use of force. And one of the things that does is it certainly leaves us open to scrutiny in any situation, but it allows us to put it out there and to be open to that scrutiny and be able to address some questions that people might have. Summaries of things like use of force, summaries on the Office of Professional Accountability to include race, gender of those who are affected by the use of force or the TASER output are included on that. We participate in the Benchmark City Survey, which currently I think there's 30 listed on here because it's 2015, but I believe currently there's 29 cities that participate. This allows us, it allows you, it allows the citizens to take a look at how their police department compares to other agencies of somewhat like size. It allows us to look at things that none of us want, or that commissioners look at, like budget and number of officers, but it also allows us to look at crime statistics, how our department is organized, and how we're affecting crime. Again, when you do these type of things, it opens yourself up to tremendous scrutiny. It's a tool for someone to use against you. And quite honestly, it's not something that we have to do, but we feel like it is very important to do so we can be as open as possible in the process. In the last 8 months, 6 months or so, we've significantly changed how we interact with the public, and one of those ways is social media. Police departments are oftentimes a little slower to come to that. We've certainly had fun doing it, but it's proved extremely important. Several occasions we've given press briefings of ongoing events that it was important to give information out. I believe the first one that we did, we had 80,000 views in a matter of 24 hours. Many times that's more significant than we can get with a newspaper or general news station. We've opened ourselves up a little bit to what it's like to be a police officer sometimes, done things like tweet-alongs or talked about our day a little bit more openly. Certainly, it's been well received. Some people don't like every moment that we have, but it does allow you to see what a police officer might deal with on a daily basis. It also gains us what would be followers. When we started, or when we had Twitter in March, we had about 500 followers. We're pretty close to 8,000. Since March, we've more than doubled our Facebook that's been around since 2009. And great, we're very great on social media. People like us. That's fine. We have friends, but that's not the purpose. The purpose is when you have important information to get out, you're able to get out that. And some of it is little things like, you're going away for Thanksgiving, students. Boy, I sure would lock your cars. And sometimes it's a lot bigger deal, and it may be affecting the safety of individuals in this town. All of that, and the 2015 survey leads to a community overall, as a whole, that's been very satisfied with the police department. But obviously, there's people that have had not as positive interactions with the police department, and we have to continue to grow and address those things as well. So I'm going to one other part is we've recently entered into a contract with Allegro Services, and we are doing a multicultural survey, which we're hoping will touch bases with different groups in this community and see what we're doing right, see what we're doing wrong, and see what we need to do better. We also have had initial talks about how they can help us as far as diversity in our recruiting. But the next question is, some people aren't so happy, and what to do and what we do in those processes. And I'll turn that over to the chief.
Captain Brixius, thank you very much. So with all that, we still have complaints, and we still have times when officers don't do the right things. So what happens? What's that process? So if you look at the complaint process, here's some of the ways that we get these complaints. By email, by phone, via social media, through the city manager's office. We've had complaints come through this body as well. They get forwarded to us. Attorney General's office as well, third party. We do accept anonymous complaints as well. So there's a lot of ways that you can complain against the police department or an officer. And when that information comes through, the investigative process is an internal investigative process. We do utilize trained police investigators that have access to the information and internal police department documents that allow us to get to the bottom of what occurred and examine whatever information we have. An important part of this process is the fact that we're a government agency, and as a government agency, there's something called garrity, which means that as the chief of police or the city manager, we can compel an officer to testify as long as they have the garrity protection. That's something that doesn't exist outside of an internal investigation, or if we had an outside body do that, you wouldn't have that capability. So that's something unique to a police department. So a police officer is compelled, if I order him or her to testify as far as give me the information about what happened on a particular incident. The accountability process after we do the investigation is it's reviewed by the person's supervisor. I end up reviewing that and make a determination of the case. In some cases, if it's a high enough discipline potential, it's immediately reviewed by the city manager and the city attorney's office. In all cases, on a biannual basis, we review all those complaints with the city manager at a briefing, and the city manager can then ask questions or probe further on any of those. Some of the things we've added to increase our transparency, and I think Captain Brixius hit on these a little bit, but we've expanded the role of the Citizens Advisory Board for Fair and Impartial Policing. We'll talk about that a little bit separately. Developed an internal warning system, so we keep track of officer conduct and misconduct and try to look at any trends coming up. We publish the year-end Office of Professional Accountability summary. I don't know a lot of departments that do that. We also publish the TASER report, the annual citation accountability report, and also this year we added a use of force review process, and summary also is published online. So there's a lot of information out there about the department and the accountability and transparency in that regards. Talk a little bit about the Citizens Advisory Board for Fair and Impartial Policing. That was something that was a state law in 2005, I believe, which mandated that all departments have an advisory board for racial profiling and training on that. It later, the law was repealed, so the departments didn't have to keep those. We've kept ours, and over the years, we've added additional duties and responsibilities to it. Like I touched on earlier, they look at the TASER report, they look at racial profiling accusations and reports, they look at they review the use of force report. They've conducted or received training on that from the Attorney General's office. They've hosted community forums on fair and impartial policing and exposed the community to their role and what police officers do. So they've over the years added more responsibilities so that they could be continually adding to their oversight of the department. With that in mind, there's some questions or some interest in review boards. Now, when I say citizen review board, that means something to everybody in the room. That we all have our idea of what a citizen review board. We'll talk a little bit about that. But I think I have a notion of it. Staff thinks they have a notion of it. But we conducted official research, so those are the places we looked at some documents in preparation for this. And in all the documents, there's 4 different types of review boards that were identified. Now, the first one is what they call a Class 1 or Level 1, which consists of a separate external group of non-sworn individuals, and they investigate the police. And so it's then reviewed by other non-sworn, and these boards may also compel testimony and may have the authority to do that. Generally, you find these in larger departments, New York, Chicago. They're relatively well-staffed, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in budget, and they also employ professional investigators that would go out and find this information. Class 2 is the complaints are investigated by the police departments, and the citizens can review the investigation and make their own findings as well. And then there are just recommendations made to the chief of police. The chief of police does not have to abide by the recommendations. Class 3, complaints are investigated by the police department. If the complainant is not satisfied with the findings or the outcome, the citizen can appeal to the board. And then the Class 4 is an auditor system, this is an independent auditor that doesn't actually investigate the complaint, but goes back and investigates the complaint process. Was the process through? The right number of interviews took place? It doesn't really redo the investigation, but just tries to find out if the investigation was fair and impartial. And then you have really all over the map bits and pieces of all these. And what the research really showed is depending on what the community is like and what the objectives are, you can kind of mix and match some of these as well. See, the IACP and the Department of Justice studies really presented the various different types of boards. We talked about the pluses and minuses, but they weren't really able to answer the question of, in the end, are they effective at reducing misconduct by police officers? They're certainly effective at giving a venue for people to talk about misconduct and bring accusations forth, but the ability to actually prevent future misconduct was not able to be found in the research. And I think that's important because I think that's the ultimate goal, is to not only hold this individual officer accountable for what they did this particular incident, but the organization and the group of officers, what are we doing to prevent future misconduct? Oop, sorry, I'm going backwards. See, I told you I was technologically challenged. Am I still going backwards?
There you go.
That's forward. Forward. I apologize. All right, so the last resource that I looked at probably gave me the most insight, and this is Professor Samuel Walker. He's published 14 books on police oversight over the years. His book, Police Oversight, that I referenced in the memo, really looked at police accountability and which one of those models is the most likely to get you that objective. And so he he asked the question in his book, is citizen review and oversight effective? And the answer really is depends. There is no definitive. There's some review boards, level 1 review boards, if funded properly, if with the right buy-in, with the right political structure, are effective. But the sustained rates aren't any different necessarily than internal investigations. And then he argues that really the sustained rate is not something what you should be looking at. Anyways, it's do you have a system that actually prevents and deters future police misconduct, and how's that affecting the policy and training of police officers so that they improve and get better over time. So really his guidance is to find a system that prevents misconduct through policy innovation, education, and proactive problem solving. And talks about the objectives of police oversight, again, to make sure that we hold not just the police officer accountable. That's kind of the low-hanging fruit, but the really bigger fruit on the tree is holding the department accountable for its accountability objectives. So the objectives of oversight, according to the research, is to conduct outreach, customer assistance, information, listening, review police investigations of complaints for thoroughness and fairness, identify problem officers, assistance with early warning. This is what an oversight person could do, or a group that would do that. Identify policy needs and changes, review policy, training needs, get feedback, assist with the development of professional standards, do quality assurance surveys. These are the things right here that really improve a department and prevent future misconduct, not just looking at whatever one particular officer did. And part of the problem, he says, whether an internal person does it or whether an external person does it, you still have the same issue. And it's kind of inherent to how police officers do their jobs. It's relatively autonomous. The supervisor's not there. It's usually, if there is a complaint, the officer's perception and word of what happened. It's the complainant's perception and word of what happened. Unless it's a horrific type example, there generally isn't a whole lot of injuries or evidence of what happened. So whether you have the internal process doing it or the external process do it, it's kind of the same problem. It's trying to really find the information. So his suggestion is you kind of focus on some of these things. So some of the suggestions that he thinks we should do, if you're a police department, is community outreach to inform the public of the complaint process. Ensuring access to the complaint process, doing brochures, how to file a complaint information, using our public media and social media to do that. Outreach with special populations, having a way to query that and getting feedback from them. Thorough and fair fact-finding investigations. Improving information with the complainant, so making sure that as the complainant goes through the process, staying in contact with that person, giving that person updates about where we are with the investigation as well. So all that kind of suggests that we need to develop a system in which we get as much information as possible about officer conduct and be able to make a judgment. The department can only do what it knows. And the way I look at this is when you go to a eye doctor and they put drops in your eyes, although I always say no because I have to go back to work. But it dilates the eye and you want more information. So some of the suggestions that we are going to put before you have kind of that overall thrust of dilating the eyeball in terms of what are we going to do. So the first is making our complaint process more attainable. So looking at making it more prevalent on our website, making it right there front and center so that you don't have to find it, putting complaint forms across the community, maybe in the library where people can put those and don't have to go to the police station, having the officers carry them in case somebody wants to get a form and turn it in later as well. The evolution of the fair and impartial police review board. So what we're looking there is turning the current fair and impartial Citizens Advisory Board on Fair and Impartial Policing, adding additional duties to that, changing the name to Community Police Review Board, so that we can ask them to do some additional duties. And what that would be to be able to receive complaints against officers in a confidential manner, to keep the name non-public. Complaints would still be forwarded to the police department for review and investigation. If there's a bias-based complaint and the person who made the complaint's not happy or doesn't agree with the findings, then the board could review those and go into executive session and be bound by rules of confidentiality and look at that and then decide for themselves whether they agree or disagree with the department, but then it ultimately would get appealed to the city manager, because that's the form of government we have, so we would have to abide by that. So that would be increasing the role of them. Body cams, we've talked about this before, but I think this would be a great opportunity to, again, dilate the pupil and get more information about interactions between police officers and the community members. So implementing a body cam program that would have to come with the funding for the body cams itself and an IT position to be able to do that as part of the 17 budget. Didn't make the cut, so we could bring that back up again as well. Looking at disproportionate minority contact information. So that's collecting information about police officer contact with the community. So whether that's a car stop in which I write you a ticket or don't write you a ticket, or you're a pedestrian and I stop and talk to you, capturing that, looking at that. But there's a lot of nuances in how you're supposed to do this, and I would suggest strongly that we hire a social scientist or somebody that would lead our efforts in this area, and we'd have to make a few changes to our computerized systems to be able to do that. This is something that the Douglas County Justice Community Coordinating Council is working on from a whole community basis, so hopefully we'll have and I'm part of that, as is the Vice Mayor, so we'll have a recommendation to the city and county, hopefully shortly, on our work there. Doing customer service, so adding a position in the department where instead of being reactive and waiting for the complaint to come in, what are we doing to go out there and try to get the complaint? So if you've bought a car or made a big purchase, maybe you get a call a week later or something, and the person asking, how was your experience? Did we do what we were supposed to do? Reviewing in-car video, reviewing body cams, if we get those as well. And then some kind of audit function. So that would be either a city attorney's office or an outside expert that could come in at various different intervals and look at some component of our department and to see if we're doing the right methodology when we do process complaints and also our policies and procedures. And then following through with our community survey that we're going to do as well. So I think that's a quick tour through the memo. It's a lot more detailed than the memo, obviously. But I think, again, for the overall objective of trying to make our organization better, to go through an evolutionary process, to utilize some of the same resources we already have, the advisory board that we currently have that's reflective of the community and wants to do more, I think we can add some components there. So I think, going back to the different types of Class 1, Class 2, Class 3, Class 4, so you're looking at a little bit of making our advisory board similar to a Class 3 review board in some respects. You're adding kind of an auditing component if you have a periodic review of stuff. And then you're also really then looking at the biggest suggestion out of the research is just get more information about what your officers are doing to guide you in your policy in prevention. So that's the body cams, that's the disproportionate minority contacts, is seeing actually what they're doing when they're having contact with people, and using all that to guide future evolution of the department and how we adopt policies and how we train.
Questions of the chief?
Just looking forward to dollar amounts attached to these recommendations and
Yeah.
what we can do and what we can't do.
Well, I think somebody mentioned this the other day, and I won't call them out, but said, well, Chief, anytime you're up here, you always ask for money. I'm sorry. You know, I would like to point out a lot of the stuff we've done with existing resources. So all these things that, as far as outreach and the website and the training and whatnot, has, you know, been some minor additional resources, but it's a lot of just people doing a lot more hard work in the department to try to do as much as we possibly can to maximize our efficiency and maximize how we're serving the community. But at some point, we're going to need a little bit of additional resources to really maximize. You know, body cams is going to need that. The disproportionate minority contact needs the right touch as far as a social scientist. It's not the department. I'm not interpreting them. It's somebody that knows how to do this stuff and can tell me what these numbers mean and give us guidance about how we collect them and what we collect, what we don't collect, and how we design a system. That's important for the results to be valid and so that for the department to accept them and also people in the community to accept them as well.
So I think in terms of body camera work, one of the advantages of not having already implemented is the technology has advanced quite a bit and the cost has actually come down. But one of the keys to that is having a good policy of retention and retrieval so that you can get back and look at that material and who has access to it and who doesn't. And Kansas law has specific requirements as to who's eligible to see it and who's not. So you have to work that into your policy. The other criticism that you constantly get when you start talking about a community police review board is that the criticism usually comes back that it's the police reviewing the police. The police are investigating the police. And so one of the things that a lot of the public does not necessarily understand is that there is a federal judicial decision referred to as Garrity. And I think it's important for our city attorney to comment on Garrity. The police and the supervision in the police all the way up to the city manager's office has the ability to compel testimony. But in compelling that testimony, there are protections that are made available to the officer so that they don't have to invoke their privilege of not testifying against themselves. So I'd like Tony to comment on that.
Thanks, Chief.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Tony Wheeler, City Attorney. The Chief referenced this case, and the City Manager also referenced it. It is Garrity versus New Jersey. It is a 1967 Supreme Court case. In this fact scenario, police officers were questioned during the course of a state investigation concerning alleged ticket fixing. And the officers were ordered to respond to an internal investigation questions and were also advised that refusal to respond to the questions could result in their discharge from employment. The officers answered the questions, and their answers were subsequently used to convict them in criminal prosecutions. The Supreme Court reviewed that and reversed and held that the use violated the employee's Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination. So Garrity, and then subsequent cases, a Gardner case that came out in 1968, has held that public employees may not be forced to provide a statement to his and her employer and then have that used against them in a criminal proceeding. But the court has recognized that public employers do need to have certain rights for accountability. A public employee can be ordered by his employer to cooperate in an internal administrative investigation and to provide statements regarding matters that are specifically, directly, and narrowly related to the employee's official conduct or fitness to serve. And statements made pursuant to an order to cooperate in an internal investigation cannot be used against that employee in any criminal proceeding. A public employee cannot refuse to answer specific, direct, and narrow job-related questions as long as the agency doesn't seek to compel a waiver of the employee's constitutional rights. So the city manager is correct. An employer does have the ability to order the cooperation of its employees in internal investigations, and that is used here as long as it is not used in subsequent criminal proceedings. An advisory board would not have that same authority to compel testimony, in our opinion, because the advisory board members would not be the employer of police officers. So, these are cases that our office monitors and public employees, police officers, have the constitutional rights that all Americans have, and we have to make sure that those rights are respected and protected as we hold public employees accountable.
Tony, one other question while you're here. We talked yesterday in our agenda meeting, and one of the questions, one of the statements brought up before about, a review board is that one individual brought up that they wanted us to grant a review board, if this comes together, subpoena power. Well, I've looked at this, and I don't believe, I'm certain I don't have the authority, or any member of this board has the authority to give a review board subpoena power. I think that would change a form of government, because under, the city manager, or city commission, city manager form of government, the employee works directly for the city manager, and we don't have the authority to give what authority that we don't even have to a board to be able to review, correct?
Yes, there's a couple of things I want to address. You are correct. We operate under the city manager form of government. Under our state law and our city code, all decisions regarding employment are made by the city manager and the city manager alone. The city manager can hire and fire employees, and that is within his or her authority to do that. If an advisory board, there are some communities that want advisory boards to have the authority to discipline or to terminate employees that are, or officers that are reviewed by the board, and that would not be consistent with our city manager form of government. And that is not something that we could delegate away, in my opinion, and that would require that we would change our form of government. And in order to change our form of government, we would have to put that to a ballot, because that is how we first established our city manager form of government. Now, on the issue of subpoenas, there is some home rule authority that a city can provide subpoena power. But the question becomes, how do you enforce that? The advisory board may be able to subpoena public or members of the public to compel and give testimony. But under the Garrity line of cases, I don't believe that an advisory board could compel a police officer to testify. That police officer could issue or raise his Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination, and the board really would have no authority to compel testimony there.
So what we've done is we've built in a bit of a relief mechanism into this process, so that after the police goes through the investigation, if in fact, and they report back to the individual that has filed the complaint, and that person, the complainant, is not satisfied, they can pursue that issue with the Community Police Review Board, and they would review that information in camera. And if they disagreed with the conclusion of the police department, they would file that information with the city manager. As the city attorney reports, the final decision on discipline and on termination ultimately does rest in the city manager's office. So that information would come back, so that there's still an opportunity for a group other than the police investigation to actually examine what was reviewed, how it was reviewed, and what the determination was, and whether there was concurrence or not with that conclusion, and then forward that to me for further review. Correct?
Correct.
Matt?
Tony, I have a question very similar to the mayor's. As I was doing research on other communities that have implemented review boards or processes like this, I was reviewing it in the context of Garrity versus New Jersey in '67, and then Gardner versus Broderick in '68. both of which talk very specifically about there not having to be an explicit threat of discipline, but rather the employee's fear of discipline if it can be objectively reasonable, I believe is the terminology they use. Long story short, I kept coming across examples of communities like Syracuse, New York, where the community effectively identified a review board process similar to what we've done, but ultimately found the review board to be truly ineffective and actual actionable steps because of Garrity. In Syracuse, for instance, they report that they went 5 years without a single substantive community review board hearing as a direct result of Garrity. So, long-winded question, but given Garrity, given Gardner versus Broderick, do you think a review board is going to be able to have any actual actionable steps toward progress? Or would some of the chief's recommendations of body cameras and things of that nature be more effective?
I think that the chief's recommendations before you tonight will go a long way to help. I think that even the recommendation that he has regarding giving our advisory board the ability to receive complaints that are investigated by the police department is appropriate and could be done even under Garrity in the Gardner case. And also the point of having bias-based complaints reviewed in camera with the ultimate decision going to the city manager. I think that can be done and can be done consistent with Garrity. So I think that his recommendations are in compliance with case law.
Okay, thank you.
So one of the recommendations was for an internal auditor that was more proactive, and I guess I don't really want to scroll down and read it, but I think that's really important because then that is more proactive, you know, where someone can look at what you've done and kind of give you feedback on it. So I think that's really important for any profession, frankly. I also was impressed that currently the current board, a little over a third of the complaints filed were internally generated by other officers. I think that's really important that other officers be able to do that.
The multicultural study that's being done, survey by Allegro, could somebody explain that a little bit more?
I'm going to ask Beth Clark with Allegro to do that. We're actually just in the beginning stages, and we were emailing back and forth about how that's going to start today, but she has the experience to do that.
Hi, I'm Beth Clark with Allegro Training and Consulting. So what we're going to do is basically lay the foundation for developing a diversity initiative. So, for instance, the city doesn't have a diversity initiative, the police department doesn't have a diversity initiative, and several other kind of key areas in the Lawrence community. So I would say the police department is being excessively proactive in this and taking on something that a lot of communities and a lot of companies and a lot of cultures are very afraid to take on. So thank you for doing this. So what it will look like basically is we'll start a needs assessment process, and that starts with my company and my team. We try to stay fairly neutral in the Lawrence community. Certainly where we live in Lawrence, so we are committed to Lawrence, but we try to stay fairly politically neutral so that when we do these kinds of processes, we can keep it as neutral as we possibly can. So we'll go through all of the communications that the police department disseminates and how the police department interfaces with the community, and then we'll start narrowing in and focusing in on specific focus groups. And we have not decided yet exactly where we're going to focus those, but so there may be focus groups in the LGBTQIA community, in the Black community, in the Hispanic community, et cetera. And we'll also do that internally. So we've got kind of a two-pronged approach where internally we're looking at the police department and recruiting and retention and promotion for maybe marginalized or diverse communities. And then we're also going to be doing that in the community to determine the trust level and the satisfaction level within smaller sub-communities of Lawrence as opposed to the majority culture, which we all know is pretty much 93 to 95% white. So then we'll be doing surveys, so we'll get a broader look at that. So the focus groups will sort of take a pulse of the community and the internal processes. And the surveys will hopefully get a much larger inclusion so that we can identify whether or not our theories and what we're hearing in the focus groups, et cetera, and through all the communications in the community, in the journal world, and everything that gets reported everywhere in this community really all add up. And then we'll create a recommendations report and start to lay the foundations for the diversity initiative and sort of strategic plan for the next 10, 15, 20 years. Anything else you guys want me to put into this? And it'll all be, it'll filter through four basic prongs. And the first is multicultural hiring and recruiting, multicultural employee development, multicultural citizen outreach and development, and then measurement and evaluation of all of those. So it's very systematic, and it will take a lot of the community really being involved and engaged to give us a really clear perspective on that.
What's your time frame?
I'm guessing that by the time we get it all done, we're looking at 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, we have a lot of international students. Is that something that you'll also work on as a focus group, or?
Yet to be determined, but I wouldn't be surprised if that becomes a part of it. Yeah.
And Haskell well as
Yeah,
well.
absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So there'll be community meetings announced that people can attend.
Yeah, and we literally just started the process. So one of the things we'll do is start to write those community announcements, and they'll all run through the chief, and then we'll kind of, as the more neutral party, create a system so that people can come through us and don't feel like they have to go directly through the police department.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds excellent.
Other questions? Okay. Tom, do you have any comment or anything about the draft ordinance at this point?
Well, I'd say that where I come from, we've implemented all three of these. I actually think that they have merit. I like the fact that we're going to do disproportionate minority contact with an analysis, hopefully through the city and the county, because DMC occurs at different stages of the judicial process. And so I think it would be healthy to be able to look at it at different steps in the judicial process. What I'm familiar with is contact at the street level and doing DMC studies at that level. We did use a university doctor who helped us interpret the data and analyze the data. So I agree with the chief that you do need somebody to be able to interpret the data and then develop steps to react to the data that you see. As to body cameras, I think that they've probably been in full use in Iowa City for over a year. I think the system's working up there, but I think you probably do need somebody assigned, whether that's an existing employee or somebody that we add to. But that, I think, is a benefit, and I think it's something that is called for in the community. So that's something that we'll probably be addressing as a part of this next budget process. I think the CPRB approach has value. There may be some statistical research out there that shows it has some limitations, but my experience with it, and I actually was infused in all of the investigations, quite frankly. When they brought police officers in, I ended up on those interview panels with the police officers. I think this is probably a more efficient use of my time, in that If there's a disagreement with the result of the police investigation, that complaint goes to the review board, and then if there's still concurrence at that level that there was something that was not satisfactory, that would then get referred to me, and that I can delve deeper into those issues. I literally sat in on all of them in Iowa City. And the reason that happened was because there was this strong concern within the community that the police were investigating the police themselves. And so, not being a police official, I seemed to be the person that they felt somewhat comfortable with infusing into it. I don't think that's entirely necessary. What I observed was some very thorough process, and I think if we go in this direction, I might be talking to the chief about sitting in and observing some of those, but not every one of them. So I think the process is intact. I think this gives us a better chance at building some more trust with the community that other eyes will be looking at this. So.
Okay. Okay, any other questions or comments right now?
I got one. On the board members, I was just reading through the ordinance a little bit. Is there a term limit on these positions? Would there be a term limit?
I don't think we have term limits.
It's something I
On
think
those
would,
positions.
something we should think about, is
Yeah.
term limits.
Well, I think,
Well, we're going to have a chance to talk about it.
yeah.
Yeah,
oh,
we'll talk
yeah,
about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, discussion just not in tonight.
Right.
I don't think that's built into the current ordinance.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is,
Actually, weren't there 3-year, it was three-year terms, but then it could be an unlimited number of them, I see.
Right, just-
Okay.
but you actually
Right.
control that in your
Right.
determination as those positions open up again. You
Yeah,
still
it says
look at them.
there's no limit to the number of terms that an individual may serve on the board in the ordinance as written.
Yeah, I think that's something that all of our
Yeah.
advisory boards should probably have.
Have term limits,
Yeah.
I think on the appointed probably too would be good.
Well, I think the board itself will be having discussions as a group on what the board's gonna look like, so,
Right.
you know,
And
obviously.
there are 2 vacancies.
There's 2 vacancies now. I mean, obviously, I haven't made those because, you know, not knowing what the future of this board was gonna be.
Yeah.
There was no reason for me to appoint someone. I mean, Baja has, you know, recommended people to me, but, you know, at this point, you know, we didn't have any idea what that board was gonna look like or
Yeah.
the direction it was gonna take, so I didn't wanna get somebody excited about serving and then say, thanks for your time, but, you know, it's
Yeah.
just not gonna work.
Yeah.
So, you know, if we want to blame somebody for no appointments, that's my deal there, so everybody needs to know that.
Is
But
that, those
was
kinds
the
of
reason.
details of the actual board members, are we going to talk about that as a future time, or is that something we should discuss now?
Well, I think, quite honestly, I think that that's probably at a future time. I think the item that, you know, probably next step is kind of the direction that we're going to want to head. Is it going to include, you know, this ordinance or some form of it? Are we going to be taking different directions on, you know, the recommendations of the chief and Captain Brixius or whatever it's going to look like? There's got to be something out there, but we'll come to consensus on all of it over time, okay?
I think it would be really helpful for us to get input, because that's what I'm looking forward to now, as we've thrown out these recommendations and ideas. If we can somehow have on the city website some sort of kind of frequently asked questions type of format, you know, something fairly simple that you can link out to other things that would show these recommendations, you know, and just something a little more concise for people to go to the website and look to see what we're thinking about. Or maybe even the Lawrence Listens can, I guess Megan's not over there. But something like that, because I'd really like to get a lot of input and not just people, you know, that just email me. You know, I'd like to get a lot. That's why I'm really happy, I guess, to hear about what she's doing.
Okay. Yep, and that's fine. I mean, I think that we should seek as much input as we could possibly get. You know, one of the things that we have, and much to everybody's liking, I mean, I've got 2 meetings left as mayor, and so I think that the opportunity here is to bring as much input as we can. Make sure that there's something that obviously we haven't forgotten. There's some other idea that, is out there, so we will open it up any way that we can, that, for input, so I think that's important.
Well, I'd just like to say that I really appreciate the thought that's gone into this. I really am impressed with it. I do have a couple of questions, I think, before we
Sure,
get on.
please.
I think Lisa hit on one of them, which is the terms. I think that's one thing in the ordinance that stuck out to me. I think we need to have essentially for appointed, we should, general rule, have like 2 terms. And that's something that I'd like to see in there. The other thing is a question about, when I look at the duties in section 3 of the ordinance, specific duties of the board, it seems that the policies that this board, the Community Police Board Review Board would have would be to review policies regarding racial or other biased policing. And everything seems to be reviewing the racial or other biased policing. Is this a place where we can have general public review, discussion of police policies in general? Or are they limited to these racial and other biased policing? I don't know if the intent was to limit it to that, or, and I guess one of the things somebody brought up was, enforcement of the fireworks ban. I mean, is that something that we're going to be doing here? Or is this something that the Citizens Community Police Review Board would be looking at?
I think that's a good
So in other
question.
words, other than racially biased complaints, would this board look at general policies
Yeah, I
of
don't
the
know.
police
I mean-
department?
I don't think that was contemplated as a part of the responsibility for this board.
Well, I mean, when you say Community Police Review Board, it's like fireworks is kind of a community issue. The police deal with it. I don't know. So, and I guess the question there is, if it's not here, where do you have those discussions? Is it here on Tuesday nights?
So let me tell you about the evolution of Community Police Review Board name. Initially, it was a Citizens Police Review Board, and that evolved because not all people in this community are citizens. And so community was a more expansive term to include anybody that is coming through this community, traveling, or maybe non-documented, has the opportunity to use this board to file a complaint. That's where that comes from. So it isn't necessarily all community issues, but everybody that happens to be in the community that has an issue with our police department.
Okay,
That's where that comes from.
thank you.
Okay.
One thing really quickly that I think is going to need some refinement or at least discussion before we move forward with anything is section 5 of the ordinance, which deals with confidentiality. I think if there's one thing we've learned in this community in the last 48 hours, it's that confidentiality is only as strong as your next, request from the media. In this confidentiality statement, it reads, board members participating in the receipt of a complaint from a citizen or in the review of police department findings in any case involving alleged police misconduct shall sign a non-disclosure statement indicating such member's agreement to protect the privacy of officers involved in the confidentiality of the board's proceedings. A non-disclosure statement must be signed by the board member before such member may serve on the board. And what happens when that gets violated? Because I think that's going to be a big point of contention with a lot of people in law enforcement particularly, is that passage of the ordinance, I suspect.
What are the penalties under law?
A person could be removed from the board. There may be civil penalties, there may be a civil cause of action against an individual that violates the confidentiality provision. There may be an opportunity where we could pass an ordinance that would make it a municipal offense to receive information as a member of this board and not adhere to the confidentiality provisions. And if that was the case, then they would be prosecuted or subject to prosecution through municipal court.
I think it's important to reiterate why the information is confidential.
Yes. As you know, complaints involving police officers will most often come from a police officer's response to a call. Those calls involve individuals in difficult situations. There's criminal conduct alleged. So part of those discussions need to protect the privacy of people that might be involved in the call, and police reports, et cetera, could be reviewed in this in-camera situation. But also, we do need to protect the privacy of our police officers and our employees. Complaints can be made, and the allegations after thorough investigation are found to have no merit or to not be sustained. And we would not want to ruin the reputation of a police officer and bring problems upon his family or his ability or her ability to continue with credibility in the department or in the city. So the confidentiality of our officers is very important, and the confidentiality of the people that they interact with must also be maintained. There are state laws that require that criminal investigation reports and the names of certain crime victims have to be maintained with confidentiality, and we intend to adhere to that. Is there anything else, Chief, that I should cover?
One of the things that we haven't talked about very much, because I feel like it falls very much in line with it, is we haven't talked about the MOU much, and there's certain protections that the officers are granted by the MOU, which is we have a long-standing history of following that, and I do believe that we have to be very careful in how we draft the language, especially of the ordinance. And looking through it again today, I know Chief and I talked about there's some places where it's a very good ordinance to start. There's some places that we have to clean up a little bit to make sure that we ensure that protection. And Tony's talked about a lot about the legal aspects of it as far as like criminal, but there's also that contract that we have, that then there's civil recourse for that.
Captain, explain MOU for the public benefit.
MOU is the Memorandum of Understanding. It is the agreement that the police officers sign with the city. It's negotiated for various terms. I believe the current term is 3 years. It has a lot of long-standing things in it, as far as how the officers are paid, how they go through discipline processes. So that was a very big consideration in this. And then what rights they have as individuals, beyond just the right of a citizen, but what rights they have as a police officer. And those things are explained pretty well in there, and I believe that we really need to adhere to those things.
Yeah, I was the appointed commissioner as part of the MOU negotiation this year. And so that's going to be very important to me that we honor the language of that. You know, we sat in a meeting, this was not done haphazardly. Captain Brixius was there, the chief was there, representatives of the LPOA were there, Casey was there, and we spent the better part of a summer in those negotiations. And I felt like we walked away from the table there in a very good place with the relationship between, you know, the city and the police department, and making sure that we knew where we were at. So as we approach this, I do want to take that MOU into consideration, that, you know, we have a contract in place with the police department that we need to make sure that our actions here honor.
If I could just be more specific, there is a section 13.2 regarding officers' privacy, and it requires that the department will make every effort to safeguard the officer's privacy when an officer is under criminal or an administrative investigation. And as Commissioner Herbert said, that is a valid contract that the city, it's a binding contract that we do have to pay attention to.
Okay. Chief?
Speaking of that, something I failed to mention in my presentation, but I think it's important. That's not to protect officers that don't need to be here, okay? So if we have officers that are violating policies, and it's egregious enough just on its face of a violation, we don't keep those officers. You know, you have a 30-year career, hopefully, sometimes less. You're a human being, you're gonna make mistakes. And if you make mistakes, the objective is, are you gonna learn from that mistake? Was it an honest mistake? Did you not do it? Was it not malicious? Is there retraining? Now, certainly, if you keep making the same little mistakes over time, and we track those, that may end up causing you to be separated from employment. So these aren't, these privacy rights, these things aren't job protections as far as protecting you from not being held accountable for your misconduct. I want to make sure that that is delineated. So if you're doing wrong, you're going to be held accountable. Sometimes it's just not all in the public light because of employee rights, not only as a police officer, but any employee out there working for any person. There's due process, there's liberty claims, you can't make statements about people and defame them and preclude their future employment elsewhere. So, I mean, there's a lot of legality with that. Again, it's not to protect people that shouldn't be there. I think we do an excellent job of finding out who those people are, and those people don't work for us anymore.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Okay, how many people want to speak to these items tonight? How many's out there?
Are we gonna take a break?
Okay, tell you what, we're gonna take about a 5-minute break, okay? Yeah, you got to, and then we'll start up. Frank, you'll be first, okay?
Frank will be first. Love your hat.
Okay, at this time, we're going to open it up for public comment on the report and also any comments about draft ordinance or anything related to this item, okay? Frank, you're first.
Frank Jansen, 33 New Hampshire. I have two brief, non-controversial questions. During the presentation that the chief made, we made mention of Garrity, which Commissioner Herbert later mentioned. I'd like to have basically what was the result of the Garrity case. The second, more important question, during the presentation, the chief used the term use of force. I'd like to have one of those people explain the continuity from the lowest to the highest use of force. What does it mean? And show me some examples. First, what is Garrity? Go ahead, Chief.
I think City Attorney Wheeler kind of discussed that, but you can fine tune that. Use of force can mean anything really from just my communication skills and how I inflect something I'm talking about. So we train officers that really your first use of force is just your persuasiveness and your personality and engagement through passive techniques where we just grab onto somebody and try to get them to come with us. We're more active, or handcuffing somebody, or if they're fighting against us, we've got things like OC spray, which is a use of force, a taser, and also baton. Those are less lethal uses of force. So we try to have the officers equipped and trained in different, various different options besides lethal force. So again, talking to somebody, some physical restraints if that's necessary. Use of some tools on the tool belt, so to speak, if that's necessary. And then ultimately, the highest level of use of force is a firearm. So that's the continuity of the use of force. There is no, in the old school, used to be you had to use one before the next, and before the one, before the next. So really just whatever is appropriate and reasonable to the situation.
What's Garrity?
I can give you my 30-second
Yeah.
government lecture, please. If you want. Basically, the Supreme Court rules that forcing a person to choose between incrimination and losing his or her job is coercion and fundamentally violates your Fifth Amendment and your 14th Amendment rights.
What does it mean?
You didn't like the Cliff Notes version?
In practice.
In practice, it would mean the equivalent of issuing someone a Miranda right, only issuing it to a police officer before they're answering questions. Is that?
In practice, it means, I'm sorry. Yeah, well, you could probably, yeah. Baja can hear me. In practice, basically, it means that it's very difficult for other than a government entity to compel testimony. And if I do compel that testimony and that person then during an internal affairs investigation gives me information that would incriminate him and her in a criminal trial, that would not be used against them. I would still get that. So they wouldn't be able to say I impose my Fifth Amendment right to self-incrimination. Go, that doesn't apply because whatever you tell me can't be used against you, but I need to know what you did so I can process this complaint. And that's important from an internal process, and having the chief or the city manager compel an employee to tell me what happened. You don't get to tell me, I need an attorney, I'm not going to talk to you, no. And if you don't talk to me, you could get fired.
It makes a smoother process.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ursula Miner. I'm president of the Lawrence Branch NAACP, and I'm here to talk about the memorandum that was put out tonight. The ACLU and the NAACP got together and did a survey in Lawrence to get the people's comments on police stops and anything else they wanted to put in that survey to us. The survey wasn't put there to finger point or bash anyone. It was simply put in place to show that we do have a problem. As much as we'd like to think Lawrence is perfect, because I'm from Lawrence, I do actually, but there is a problem. So with the results of the survey, we did a presentation with a press conference. After the press conference, later on, the LPD, the police department, did reach out to us to sit down and discuss it. I would like to say that anytime we've requested to speak with the police department, they have been very receptive and have sat down and talked to us. The memorandum that's in place right now, or we're trying to put in place, the LPD contacted us, and we sat down and discussed what we would like to see come out of it and what they would like to see. And then prior to the meeting, we actually sat down and went through the memorandum together, which I thought was really, really great. I feel like the memorandum and the proposals that are in it is a big step in a huge direction. It is huge. And I think it's the right direction to go. I feel like it's going to make citizens feel safe, have a great interaction with the police, and hopefully the police with them, and that it brings a big voice to the community. Thank you.
Thanks, Ursula.
I'm Lois Sorth Lopes, and I was working with Ursula on the NAACP ACLU Task Force on Police Stops. And I came at this as much from the ACLU end as the NAACP end. And to be a little bit more specific, there are some things that we had in our press conference said that we wanted to see the police department do. One of them was to keep track of the number of stops that they did, even if, the race of the person who was stopped, even if a ticket wasn't issued, or even if it was for stopping a pedestrian walking down the street. And you can see that in the memorandum that the police department has put forward, that they have addressed those kinds of things. Like Ursula said, we're very pleased at the direction. We hope that our contact with the police department will continue as they work to implement it, and we definitely feel it's on the right course. So thank you.
Thanks, Lois.
I once again will not be giving my name. However, I can assure you that I do represent and speak for the community. I noticed that I was referred to as the person who refers to themselves as that last time I was up here. So I have a quick question about the types of the Citizens Advisory Board, and then I have a, I guess, probably a citizens engagement complaint. So the first question is for the Type 2, Class 2. That is when it says, complaints are investigated by the police department, citizens review the investigation, and then they can make their own findings. So my question here is, it says after that, so first, the complaints are investigated by the police, and then citizens review the investigation and make their own findings. But then the next step is that the recommendations are made to the chief of police. Our question is, after that step, the citizens review the investigation and then can make their own findings. Is it possible for the board to recommend to the city manager to compel a subpoena rather than the police chief? Because the city manager also has the power to compel a subpoena, correct?
I can compel testimony. I don't know about a subpoena.
Yeah, I don't think subpoena, but testimony.
So only the testimony?
Yeah.
Okay. After that, what about instead of reporting the recommendations to the police chief, the recommendations are given to the attorney general? Is the next step.
Yeah, the Attorney General doesn't review what the police department does, so you can either make a complaint to the police department, or you can make a complaint to the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General's office independently investigates, so whether we conduct an investigation or not is independent of what the Attorney General's office is. And they may come and ask for our investigation to use in their investigation, but they wouldn't necessarily continue our investigation.
Right, but the findings that the Citizens Advisory Board or their recommendations would still be valid to give to the Attorney General, correct? Even though it wouldn't be the investigation done by the Attorney General, the findings would still be, or the recommendations would still stand.
Yeah, I don't think there's a mechanism to give those recommendations.
Chief, could you come to the microphone, please?
A lot to share. I don't think there's a mechanism to take our local Citizens Advisory Board or a community police review board's recommendations and give those to the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General's office just has its own independent way they will receive the complaint, they will investigate it. As part of their investigation, they have the ability to subpoena police records and all that stuff, and then they can issue their own findings, but they wouldn't take our review board findings or our findings into consideration.
Is that because they can't due to policy or law, or is that just because it's not been done before?
I can't, I don't know. I would suspect it's just a separation of the state government and local government.
Okay, well, maybe that's something that we could look into, especially if
Tony,
we don't.
would you know about that, Tony?
I would just want to insert that I don't believe this body municipality has the authority to tell the state government or a state agency what it should or shouldn't do. They have certain statutory obligations that are established by the Kansas legislature, and they have a budget, and they probably have to use their resources to fulfill the mission that they've been given by the Kansas legislature. I don't know if we wrote it into our ordinance, if they would even honor it.
Okay, so I have 3 questions for that. First off, you said you don't believe, so we're not positive, right? Like that when you first opened, you said I don't believe that is something that they could do. So,
Well, I haven't done specific research into that specific question, but my understanding of state government and city government, there is a separation of what authority we have to pass on to a state government.
right, yeah. I'm just saying like we're not positive. I'm not saying that it's expected that everyone has an answer to every question.
I
I'm
think
just
I've
saying that
answered
if we
that
have
question.
a doubt,
We'll have to get an answer to that, okay?
Okay, cool. Also, I have kind of a concern with that because you said that you mentioned their funding and that they have specific jobs to uphold, but really isn't it the government's job to uphold and keep safe its citizens? So if there's a concern from a citizen, I don't understand why that wouldn't be valid.
And here again, I doubt we have an answer for that this evening,
Right, so
okay?
maybe we can look into that. Yeah, okay. So my last citizen engagement is a concern with Allegro. Now, my understanding of neutrality might be different, but I attended a Lawrence Direct Action meeting 2 weeks ago where a woman spoke up, Beth Clark, in reference to Allegro and encouraged non-marginalized folks to invite marginalized folks to dinner to better understand their narratives. So my problem is having the police department having their multicultural diversity training run by someone who thinks that we can understand and comprehend the narratives of marginalized folks by inviting them to dinner. That just really doesn't make any sense. So I would like to see another option for Allegro. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comment? No. Katie?
Good evening. My name's Katie Walsh, and I'm speaking only for myself this evening. What I'd like to say at first is that we need to give a big shout out to Laura Rath, who I'm sure, Mayor, you remember her. For years and years, she came before the commission and worked hard to get a citizens review board for our community. And unfortunately, it took Ferguson and everything that has become public since. But she did an awful lot of preliminary work for this. I also wanted to say, I'm part of the NAACP and the ACLU, so I'm very happy because a lot of our concerns, it looks like they're being taken seriously with this new initiative, especially the body cams, which we have asked for years. And I'm so happy to hear they're going to try to get money for that in the 2018 budget. Also, the racial stop statistics are very important. And that wasn't only in Lawrence that survey was held, that was in 4 other Kansas communities that don't record the I can't think of what to say, that don't record that. Their police and sheriff's departments don't keep those stats, even though they're very important. I also had a question. The Wichita Citizens Advisory Board does have subpoena power. So I was wondering if they only have subpoena power to bring in citizens. And, sounds like according to the law, they couldn't subpoena police, but there may be a way to subpoena citizens. I'm just bringing that up. I don't know. And I am also way in agreement with Commissioner Boley about term limits on city advisory boards. I think that especially around this concern, we need, you're only allowed to re-up one time. As our community changes, we need fresh faces and outlooks on a board like this. And that's on all our boards, I believe. In terms of, this doesn't sound like it applies, but I think it does, around mental illness and the crisis intervention training that our officers are finally getting, which I'm so grateful for. My understanding is that the chief will be the last one to get training in order to get the officers on the street trained, and I would love to see the chief get training right now. It involves vets, PTSD, people with mental illness, the many people with head injuries in our community, and it has proven so amazingly effective all across the country, especially in Topeka. Far fewer deaths for people who have mental illnesses. I also wondered how our police department is doing on training more officers in learning Spanish, because that's been a problem in the past, and it will come up again. I know this seems tangential, but I think it applies to fair community policing. And last, we all have a lot of respect for Baja, who is head of the commission, but I have been asked off the record by a person who is on the commission to let you know that members of the commission are not allowed to place things on the agenda, only Baja. And this person is frustrated and feels like that might not be fair. And every advisory board or board I've been on, all members have been allowed to suggest things for the agenda. So maybe that is a procedural thing that just needs to get cleared up. Thank you.
Thanks, KT.
Do all boards have the ability to put new business at the end of an agenda? Is that another guideline we need to have our advisory boards in general follow?
I would say there's not a standard adopted practice on that. Different boards have different practices.
Mm-hmm. That is something I'm hoping that we can tackle next year, is having standard guidelines and notifications for all of our advisory boards. So I guess that's something that we should take a look at as well.
Can I ask KT a question? Where did you get your information on Wichita? I asked that because when I was doing research into the cities that do that, I came across an article, Wichita Eagle, July 2016, and it mentioned specifically that they don't have subpoena power because of a Kansas law that prevents that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got it out of a Pitch article recently. I can't tell you the date about community policing, so could be I misread it. I usually trust the Pitch, so thanks.
We'll check.
We definitely want the chief to have the CIT training. Have you done that yet?
We have certain components of it, like the mental health first aid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, other public comment? Anyone else?
Chuck?
Chuck?
Mayor, members of the commission, let me just say first who I am. I'm Chuck Epp. I'm a professor at the University of Kansas. I'm also a member of the community, what is it, the Criminal Justice Coordinating Commission Council. I say that every day and I can't remember it here. I've studied these issues for 25 years. I've written a couple of books on police accountability and service to the community. I say that just by way of background. This is a very important proposal that the Chief of Police has put before you. It is comprehensive in the sense that it has a number of parts that address different aspects of this question. Each of the parts plays an important role. I would very much encourage you to take the recommendations very seriously, to include each of these parts in some significant form in whatever you adopt coming out of this. Because each of them, as I say, is very important. Let me just address a couple of things about these parts. The Citizen Advisory Board or Community Advisory Board, whatever we wish to call it, plays an essential role in ensuring the public legitimacy of whatever oversight mechanism that you adopt. That sort of body can play that role very well when there's a productive relationship between it and the police department. We see that developing here in Lawrence. And I expect that that will continue with the new powers and new role that that board is to have. The other parts, though, I think are especially important, and so let me just say a couple things about them, and I'm not going to belabor these points or go on at great length, and I'd be happy to talk further if you want in other settings. The proposal to gather data about contacts with members of the public by officers is essential to everything else. This is what professional police departments are increasingly doing across the country. It's essential for knowing what officers are doing. It's essential for contributing to retraining, to discipline when necessary, but also to assuring members of the public when there isn't a problem, and that's often the case as well. And in the environment that we're in now, that sort of assurance is essential now and will be essential going ahead. As the city manager mentioned, this is also that data gathering an essential part of a more comprehensive examination of racial disparities such as they are throughout the rest of the criminal justice system, and the CJCC is working on that comprehensive set of policies and programs. And so this is a key part of it. Everything rests on that. I can't emphasize enough how important that is. I want to say a few brief things about the auditor function as well. And I know that there are questions about how this might be implemented precisely, but that's an important adjunct to the Community Advisory Board for precisely the reason that Commissioner Boley raised. The community advisory boards can be very useful for looking into individual complaints. But individual complaints against officers are only part of the issue that one might want to consider when thinking about police policies and practices. The auditor can look into broader policy questions, can work very productively with a chief of police to begin to address whether there are areas that could be improved in that sort of a way. Now again, how broad is the scope of the jurisdiction of that auditing function is a question for you all and for further discussion, but that's an important and valuable adjunct to the Community Advisory Board in many places. And the research on it suggests that it can play a very productive role in improving policing when it needs improvement. Let me wrap up. I'm really impressed with this report and this set of recommendations. And I think we have a lot to celebrate here tonight in Lawrence. The report observes how well the police department is doing in so many ways. It also suggests steps forward that will address continuing questions that some people have. And I think those steps forward are really, really important. And I hope that they gain your support after your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment?
One quick
You have your name?
response. Mike Chappell, 2701 Meadow Drive. I think what the chief and the captain put before you is a very good plan. Now, please, also, remember, I heard this stat on TV before I came. Less than 1/4% of police officers nationwide disrespect the badge. Most of them do their job, and all they want to do at the end of their shift is go home safely to their family. And I'm hearing stats pitched about what happened 2 years ago. Please remember that some of those were falsely carried on by the news media, and they were not true. That when you attack a police officer, reach for his gun, do not stop when they tell you to stop, bad things are going to happen. So we have to take everything into consideration. Please.
Thank you. Okay, other comment?
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Drew Fennelly. I'm a Lawrence resident, I'm a Lawrence police officer, and I'm the chairman of the Lawrence Police Officers Association. For those that aren't familiar, the Lawrence Police Officers Association is the organized body that represents those in the rank of officer and detective on the Lawrence Police Department. It does not include staff positions such as sergeant, captain, and chief. I had a fairly significant statement prepared to give tonight. I don't think it's necessary. A lot of what I was going to cover has already been covered. I know that there's probably a perception that as the chairman of the collective bargaining unit associated with the police department, or some people may call it a union, that I'm here to be an obstructionist and to stop you from doing it, whatever it is that you intend to do. That would be a fallacy. I'm here tonight to tell you that the Lawrence Police Officers Association has met and discussed these topics, these issues that the chief has presented to you tonight. And we're very much in favor of almost everything that the chief is presenting. There's a common misperception that police officers don't want body cameras. I'm not sure where that misperception comes from. We are very much in favor of body cameras. We can't wait for you to fund that appropriately and get the staff in place for that to occur so that we can have those in place, because it protects us just as much as it protects the community. We do not fear body cameras. We do not fear studies on disproportionate minority contacts. We're eager to get the results of those studies and to see how we can better improve as a police department. We do not fear community surveys. It's important for us to know how the community feels about us so they can let us know what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. The only issues that we're going to have moving forward is some slight modifications of the ordinance and some language that's used in the ordinance. I don't see those issues as being insurmountable. So I'm here to tell you that the LPOA is here to support the chief's plan, and I look forward to working with you moving forward on that plan. Thank you.
Thanks, Drew. Okay. Any other public comment?
Are we not signing anymore? No?
Please do.
I can do it. It's a small list. Good names up here, though.
Yeah.
So the first question that I have is, when is the contract over?
Yeah, could we have your name, please?
Oh, I'm Steve Smazniak. Been here a time or two. I'm sorry. Forgive me. When is the contract over with the police? December of 2018? Okay, thank you. Because I think it's a bad contract if it's designed to protect the police officers and not our citizens. It does protect police officers in the police department. It does an excellent job of keeping things insulated and insulated from accountability. So that's really what we're looking at here is what I think the citizens would like is accountability and transparency, and keeping it all insular so that it goes from the police department to our city manager, and never with confidentiality agreements, never sees the light of day. That does neither of those. So there are, and I want to be very clear, I do not condone protecting any police officer that performs misconduct in the name of this city. And my suggestion here is simply to protect humans and improve policy while we look at that contract in the future, December 18, 2018. Hopefully we can do better for our citizens. But in the meantime, there are ways to protect their anonymity, the anonymity of the police officers. There are ways to do that and to keep the level of accountability and transparency so that the civilians have the ability to review what the police are doing. So step one, you would have the complaint being received, right? Step two, whoever receives the complaint processes it to strip all of the personally incriminating details, puts together some rebuttal devoid of those same details put together by the police. So then step three, the Civilian Review Board reviews the incident publicly. So they have it here and they talk about what happened, or wherever that forum is, because this space sucks. But step four, then we have the civilian review, right? So that's where you can have all of that happen out here. And for me personally, I care less about, we always get on this. We have to get rid of the bad cops. We have to get rid of the bad cops. Okay, I care less about that than I do about getting rid of the bad system that protects those bad cops. Because I honestly do believe that there are a few good cops out there that want to do their job and go home and save people, right? I do believe that. I'm not anti-cop. They serve a purpose for our community. They save lives. This is an important job, and that's why I'm here, because it's important. So that's where there are those cops out there that want to do their job. There's the system that is propping them up against these other cops that are not, right? So if you believe that there are some bad cops, that's why we're here to do some civilian review work, right? Because the system doesn't work as it is. That's why we're here, because you think that it needs to improve. That's our baseline. So it does need to improve. But let's not worry so much about taking care of those bad cops as we do the system that protects them. That's what this would do by having it all out in public on what the police's policies are, what the appropriate policies are in place for putting together those kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Accountability for those police officers. There's a way to strip that so you don't know that it's Tom, the police officer, that did act X, Y, or Z. You know that there was a police officer in Lawrence that did some misconduct, right? And then you find out that we've got 10 of those type of incidents. So if you keep it stripped of those particular those details, that would get us into a lawsuit, but you still have that accountability and transparency. I think that goes a long way to repairing what we have, but you have now is an insular way of just keeping it shrouded. So if you're right, and the police officers here are great, then we've got it all out here, and we see it with our own eyes, and it's out and it's open, right? And there's no debating it, whether it's just because the police chief, it's in his best interest not to investigate his police officers very rigorously because he wants his job, right? If he had an investigation that came out that showed that there were police officers that were committing misconduct, and he's been here for a few years, and it's happened on his watch, it's not good for him. It's bad optics. So what I continuously hear from the police officers that have come up here is that we civilians continue to see the police refer to this as our board, right? I believe we do not need the police's review board. The police pitching this as their review board is not what we need. We need a review board of the police department and their policies. That's what gets you the transparency and the accountability that the civilians are looking for. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. Nope, we got another man.
Oh,
Hello, everyone. Andrew Nussbaum. Community member. I've heard a lot of terms tonight that were very similar to fair and impartial, neutral and neutral and neutral, unbiased, fair and impartial, ... And yet, before those terms and or after those terms, I remember this same space being a space that earlier this fall, the City Commission had a whole week of celebrating the police, and within 2 weeks, called the police because community members were expressing concerns. To me, that doesn't seem impartial, fair, and or, what is the other word I said, neutral, in terms of believing all of you are neutral or impartial in the votes that you will have in terms of what happens in terms of community review board. From my perspective, what I've heard tonight, my perspective, again, about an hour and a half of like a pro-police propaganda and perception campaign tonight. We take them out to eat here, we do swing sets here, we go to their Boys and Girls Club over here. We know you do a lot of good stuff. That's not the concern. Our concern is acknowledging and being held accountable in terms of systemic stuff and or acute, not okay stuff. We can appreciate the positive stuff, but not if it's really about changing public perception instead of actually shifting and changing the problems. I think it's also important, my perspective and what I'm hearing from community members that I listen to and believe, that it's important for we as a local police force and nationally start to actually acknowledge and share a more critical conversation about the history of policing in this country. I'm a history teacher. I went to college with Matthew. And acknowledged that the genesis of policing in this country did come out of a mixture of imperialism, colonialism, slave patrols. That is the genesis, the emergence of policing in this country came out of those foundations, where they were purposely created to ensure that elite, wealthy, white landowners were protected, and everyone else was then not. So we need to acknowledge that, not even say, we need to acknowledge that, therefore there's a more honest conversation, a more impartial conversation about, so that is our history. Can we also acknowledge some historical harms here in Lawrence that we have been a part of, not necessarily that we have done specifically, because historical memory matters, historical acknowledgement matters. And then perhaps there'll be a more honest conversation, or perhaps a conversation where actually more members of the community will feel safer to have their voice heard. I think it's also important to give credit where credit is due, locally and nationally. I heard tonight a lot of people go, oh, thank you, police. You are, in quotes, exceedingly proactive, from the same stakeholder that said neutral, neutral, neutral. From my perspective of neutral, when we're talking about large systems, systems of power, power dynamics, and marginalization, when someone professes neutrality, people that are already in power are going to be drawn to that because they know that neutrality isn't actually neutral. It is some version of status quo, and the people that understand neutrality actually means standing on the side of power are going to be drawn away from that. So if we're saying we're going to do a neutral conversation and bring people together, from my perspective, my understanding of studying critical movement theory, my understanding of complex history, my understanding of political social movements, is that actually scares marginalized populations away. So the people that are going to come to those conversations, they're going to be involved in those surveys, are not going to actually be representative of the peoples that are most silenced by police officers and police departments. So when I say give credit where credit is due, I'm worried that tonight we gave too much credit. I definitely, from what I've studied in other cities too, definitely agree that this police department here in Lawrence is listening, is willing to do some hard work and acknowledge some harms. And I believe a lot of the credit actually needs to go to where it's earned, local movement. Because I think any active work that's happening isn't necessarily proactive. I think it's possible that it's reactive to local movement, to local push, and to national movement, Campaign Zero, Black Lives Matter, NAACP, ACLU, saying we've had enough, here's what we expect, we're going to keep showing up, and we're going to expect it again. That's proactive. Active is possibly what's happening now, and or reactive. So we need to give credit where credit is due instead of co-opting what is happening. We also need to make sure that when we decide, whatever we decide in terms of what this community review board becomes, that it's not a co-opted entity that is more concerned about the privacy and protections of police officers instead of the experiences and the vulnerabilities of community members. And what I heard tonight was again and again and again a conversation of protection of police, privacy, but not at one point tonight, and correct me if I'm wrong or come back and talk to me, I really want to hear that, about protections of people that make complaints, protections of somebody that goes through the process and risks themselves to say, hey, that review, that secretive internal review that we're seeing in the school district doesn't go so well when you are tasked to investigate yourself, right? Pretty good chance you're going to try to protect yourself in that. So I didn't hear, from my perspective, a concern let alone a mention of protecting marginalized populations, protecting people that had interactions with the police force, police system, police individuals, in terms of going through the complaint process, the possibility of backlash, the possibility of explicit or implicit threat, let alone the financial or opportunity costs that said person or said groups would have to go through that process. If we make these steps too complicated, then the people that would need to go through it won't have the financial resources, the opportunity and time resources to actually go through the process. Let's be honest, if that's what we want, if we actually want nobody to go through the process, let's be honest about that. But if we make it too complex and too bureaucratic, then it will do its work for it and protect police in conclusion. Guess that's my last statement, but I again ask when and before we vote, because we learned what a 7-0 unanimous vote looks like without asking more critical questions. I just ask of the five of you to ask critical questions, to ask, hold on, so what is the genesis, emergence of the police department here in Lawrence? How is that connected to police nationwide? Let's talk about historical harms in Lawrence. Let's talk about in the 60s and 70s. Let's talk about what we mean when we say different things. If we can begin that conversation and ask more critical questions and not just be persuaded by these magical propaganda nights, as I feel tonight was, of pro-policing, then perhaps a trust, a beginning to acknowledge harm, the possibility of restorative practices and restorative justice with the local community would be more likely. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Frank, you had one last comment?
We should all get some adult education credit for the presentations tonight. I don't have a smartphone with notes. What I want to mention is what Mayor Amick said at the very beginning tonight. He said we all make mistakes, right? The police, they aren't really bad police. They're police with bad activities. They are also innocent until proven guilty. Both the complaints, whoever makes the complaint and whoever the complaint is about is going to be confidential. We don't release that information. And I lost my track. This board that's going to be meeting and protecting people, as we know, as we said, the confidentiality will protect everybody there, and people, as we know, are innocent until proven guilty. So I don't think there's any problem here, and the police department, the chief, he doesn't want to lose police officers. They are money and time spent training and getting them up to where they are. When there's a complaint against the police, they will be meeting to discuss this, but the chief does not want this man or woman to be left out, to be fired. They want them to be retrained, get help to prevent their activities in the future from causing harm. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, well, I believe everybody that, if I counted right, everybody got to speak that wanted to speak tonight? Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for their participation tonight. Chief, I want to thank you for your report along with Captain Brixius. Tom, thank you for your memos, and Tony for the work provided by City Attorney's Office. Again, thank everybody for coming this evening. Thank you to our officers and the work that you provide. I can't thank you enough. Anyway, we will see you all very soon. Please, if you know someone that needs to get us information, pass it along, that we will be getting that information. Tom, I would imagine as we go through this process and we ask questions about it, it's probably going to be over the next several weeks for sure, because this is quite a process, I believe. So anyway, we look forward to seeing everybody soon, and if there's nothing else, guess I don't need a motion to adjourn. Ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned. Thank you all.